Mental health with an India lens. Real stories, real conversation, real talk.
23rd of January, though, I sat in my Bombay flat reading 7 books.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Health Collective Talks. I'm Amrita Tripathi, and really delighted to have with us today two phenomenal young writers, Manjiri Indurkar and Urvashi Bahugana, who I want to just pop into the live stream right now and thank them so much for joining us for this episode of Health Collective Talks. Manjiri, we've spoken before about your book, It's All in Your Head, M. It's great to have you here today as well. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
And Urvashi, it's really been phenomenal to see the kind of reception No Straight Thing Was Ever Made is getting, including on our site. Tanmoy had reviewed this. So big congratulations to you on this. And thanks also to you for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for the review that you so kindly put out.
It's been, I think, quite a journey when it comes to talking about mental health and mental illness in India, for sure. Let me say at the macro level, I'm sure it's not easy when you're doing it, especially when it comes to your own, friends and families and sort of personal circles. I want to start by asking both of you what has the reception been like, and maybe starting with you, Manjari, any reactions that have really stayed with you since your book came out?
So I think the book is doing rather well when it comes to like reviews, and people's reactions have been like extremely powerful in some sense. I mean, so many people, so many women, young women wrote to me saying that one, you are not a celebrity. Why you we didn't know that this is even possible, that like one could write a book like that about your struggle when like nobody knows you. I was like, yeah, thanks. And then I mean, like, they were all like, this is exactly what has happened to me, or this is my story. And like people not just in India but like people abroad also like writing to me saying that like, oh my god, I've never read anyone who's written about trichotillomania, or like who's written so honestly and like with so much authenticity about the child sexual abuse bit. Like it's basically like you've told everything that there is to tell. And I think that like that is something that has stayed with me, that like people are really not used to hearing these stories, that don't want to hide so many things, not just about the things that happened, but like the journey that I went through, like it like how it was violent in like a very different sense. And that is something that I think that I've talked to like a lot of women, and that has been their experience. It's just not been out there. So like I think that acknowledgement has been incredible for me.
Well, that's incredible to hear. And then just the fact that people are reaching out, that the story is resonating. I think jury's still out. You are famous now, so we'll see what they say in the next installment. But how about you, Urvashi? I mean, your book has come out a little bit more recently, of course. But what are some of the reactions that might have stayed with you?
So it's been out, I think, 6 weeks or something like that, maybe a little bit less. So I have fewer reactions to report that, but it has been predominantly positive. I think people have said to me similar things to what they've said to Manjari, in the sense that people are seeing parts of themselves that they didn't expect to see from an Indian writer, I think. And in my case, I haven't heard from that many young women. I've been hearing from women who are a little bit older, who are saying that, I can relate to so much of this. And I think that's surprising to me, and it's surprising to them, that so much of this experience is universal, so much of it is undiagnosed. And I think even in situations where it isn't depression and anxiety at work, I think that people are finding the book relatable because it's talking about dynamics. It's talking about how all of these things are interlinked: relationships, environment, privilege. And the fact that, when you are someone who's in my sort of like socioeconomic position, you do have like more access to therapy, more access to diagnosis, but also that like I'm a product of like the time that I live in, that I've been fortunate enough to have access to those things. 10 or 20 years ago, I think it was, if I had been the age that I am now, it would have been far less likely that I would have had access. So some of that stuff's been very interesting to hear. Yeah.
Can I just add like a little bit to Urvashi, what Urvashi was saying? I think that like a lot of older or like women who are like probably my age or Amrita's age or like a little bit older are reaching out to you because I've been saying this to you, and like this is something like constantly I keep hearing in the circles, is that Urvashi's writing has this incredible amount of maturity that like surpasses her age. Like I've never read anyone who's as young as Urvashi is write with like so much clarity and faith in herself. It's incredible. Like I am a fan of Urvashi's. I mean, she knows that.
Thank
Oh,
you
I'm so
so
glad
much.
to hear
I loved.
that. Go on,
Yeah, I was
Urvashi.
just saying that that it's totally mutual. I loved your memoir, and I think it gave like it just resonates because no one is writing about this stuff.
I in fact read your interview of Manjari, so I'm really glad that this is like one book club we can all get behind. I think and see the see the acclaim flow in. It's interesting what you're both saying about people reaching out. I find that it is. It feels like there has been a shift. I mean, we can talk at some point about the flip side of that, because I've had people also talking about how folks think that pop psychology is the way to go now, and every Insta post is about mental health. But there's something very, very profound and solid about what both of you are doing. No pressure. I always want to preface that by saying, please don't feel you have to carry the weight of all of that. But let's give viewers a sort of sense of what your writing is like, because the other wonderful thing is you both have it's the literary quality of your writing, which is also really nice to see, right? And there is the merit of having the first person narrative and lived story, and there's the added bonus of the fact that you're both incredible writers. Urvashi, can I ask you to start with a short reading, and then Manjari will come to you.
Sure. So just a little bit of context behind the excerpt I'm going to read. It's from a chapter on a relationship that I was in when I was quite depressed. The depression magnified the need for love, if that makes sense. It gave the love a higher decibel, a more resolute form. It made me feel being alone, being without the familiar, even if the familiar was a knife turning inside me. I remember all the times I almost left, threatened to leave. As Anne Patchett wrote, they broke apart and came together so many times. They were like a plate that had been dropped on the floor repeatedly, more glue than china. After witnessing my multiple threats of leaving followed by inaction, my mother finally got exasperated and told me, "You do not have it in you right now to go through with a breakup. Just leave it be." She was right. I only had strength enough for threats. The truth is, I needed you to leave. I could trust another person's decision, another person's judgment as final as the right decision. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Just a little bit of applause if you can hear it. Manjari, over to you.
Yeah. If you do not tell the truth about yourself, you cannot tell it about other people. Virginia Woolf. I. I am my I's carbon copy. So alike that if they made a film about our relationship, and I hope they do, both the roles will have to be played by the same actress. Just like in Lamhe, Khudagawa, and Nagina, Sridevi's daughter was always played by Sridevi. I am my I's daughter, always. And what a privilege it is to look like my eye. I have always had a hard time believing people whenever they told me I look like her, because my eye is beautiful. Her face radiates with a kind of beauty that hits you in warm waves of love. She is one of those people who moved others to break into songs for her. When I was young and yet to become my eye, she lived alone in another city. In the morning, she'd get ready and leave for work, and a boy in that gully, whose voice resembled Mohammed Rafi's, would croon, "निकला ना करो तुम सच धज के, ईमान की नीयत ठीक नहीं." As problematic as it might be in our modern day context, it was considered romantic once. No one has nor will sing such songs for me, which is why having her face is a privilege. It means that I might be beautiful too, like her, even if just a little bit.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for writing, both of you. I want to come to Manjari, the influence of Bollywood in your writing, and Urvashi talked to you a little bit about your literary influences as well. But just taking one step back to ask you, Manjari, first, why was it important for you to tell this story? And I know we've talked a little bit also about that, the balance between sharing as much as you want to share, a very personal journey, balancing out some of the fear that comes with that and the concerns and worries. Can you share a little bit about what went into this memoir?
So the thing is that, like, since I started talking about it, I had decided, like, maybe consciously, subconsciously, that I don't want to hold back. But like, there are always these lines that I have to draw. I mean, I can't be sharing everything about myself, and it was always a struggle. That, like, when I wrote something, I was like, am I oversharing? Is this like TMI? Am I going to get like a TMI message from my editor that, like, dude, you need to cut this out? But the thing is that, like, I actually wanted to tell people that, like, this is how I felt, and this is how it went in my head, because, like, I was like living with it for like so many years. Like, 25 years of silence is like a long time to be silent about something, and I just had to come out, and so I feel like I did not set like a lot of limitations for myself, and it made things a little bit easier. And I think, like, which is why, like, a lot of my friends are also surprised that, like, I'm kind of taken aback by the kind of like detail that you have given. But I don't think that I can write in any other way. Like, this is the only way I know how to function. Like, either I'm honest or I'm not. So I mean, yeah, as difficult as it is, it's also like important for me to do that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, and that honesty really does come through. I think it's still, we're still in India. There's so many Indias, but it still takes a lot of courage to write this openly. This is going to be part of the record, and I know that a lot of folks I speak to who share their story wish it wasn't a matter of courage anymore. I don't think we're quite
Yeah.
yet there yet, though. So kudos to you again for deciding to do that. Urvashi, did you have to think along similar lines, how much to share, how much not to share? I've read a few of the excerpts, but also, I think it somewhere says in the blurb that you're the first person in your family to speak openly about mental illness. That is its own responsibility in a way. How did you decide that you actually want to write this book?
I think I had this sense that I wasn't ashamed of the illness, and that I wanted people to understand it better, because what I often faced in my relationships was that even if people weren't saying things to my face, it was still hard for them to wrap their heads around it. Like, why is it that she's not able to overcome this stuff? Why is it that it's so repetitive? Why does it like stop her from doing just like day-to-day stuff? Why does it stop her from being reliable? And I think I wanted to make that more transparent. Like, I wanted to talk about, all of the things that go on. And I couldn't possibly say that in every conversation I had with people. And I think that's part of the reason I wrote the book, because I could write about it in a way that I couldn't talk about it. I could make my illness sympathetic even to me, in a way that, like, when it's just in my mind, I find it hard to like sympathize with myself all the time. I'm very hard on myself. I'm like, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I failed in this way, I failed in that way. And a lot of the time it is because, like, my symptoms have kicked in. It's a particularly bad time for me, but I'm just like, but I'm not keeping up with people. No one is going to understand this. And sometimes I don't understand it either. And I think writing the book for me was a way to like be compassionate and clear, and also I think a little bit prove to myself that these challenges are extremely real. And I think for me, like, the honesty part of it like came naturally from that place of like wanting to be honest with myself, wanting to be honest with other people. And I think one of the things that I found difficult but also easy at the same time was in terms of like what to share. I wasn't like worried so much about details, but I was worried that, what does this perspective do? Like, I'm putting like an opinion out here. How do I ensure that I'm also being hard on myself? Like if I've been hard on some family member or some ex, how do I also hold myself to account? So I think that honesty and accountability thing was something that I had to juggle a bit, but I think I was happy with where I landed at the end.
No, that's great to hear, and actually very helpful. If you have, one or two influences you would, or people that sort of inspired you, who would you point to? Urvashi,
Inspired my writing or
your writing in general. I feel like maybe your journey, your writing, this book, any influences you'd want to point to.
I think so. This isn't a person, but it is a website. So I think Skin Stories was something that really helped me think about this collection, because it was the first place that asked me to write about these things. And when I had written that essay, I realized, oh, this is possible for me to like talk about my story. And reading things on Skin Stories allowed me to feel like there is an audience for this. There are things in these stories that are new to me. I am learning. I am being able to see things that I wouldn't see otherwise. Like I don't know of I didn't know of another place at that point of time that was bringing such stories to the table. So that was a major influence, or that was something that like pushed me, I think, in the beginning. Otherwise, I mean, I'm sorry, but the influences are like very, they're very many. So it's hard for me to choose one. But yeah, if I had to choose just one, I would say Skin Stories. Yeah.
Manjari, I think you've spoken about Skin Stories as well in the past, actually. But
Yeah, both of us have been published by Skin Stories, and Skin Stories has sort of like provided a very beautiful platform, not just like for us to write, but also to read. Like so many women that have women and men and non-binary people, that their stories that I read on Skin Stories has been definitely very motivating. But for me, in inspiration, motivation came in the form of like Jeanette Winterson's book, Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal. Like that book like seriously changed my life. And there's this British Nigerian writer, Helen Oyeyemi. I'm a huge fan of not just her novels, but like the interviews and her life stories, and like the things that she talks about, the things that have moved her. So there was this one interview, I think Guardian or BuzzFeed, I don't remember who published it, where she's talking about like how she was sitting at this one bench in London, and this one man who came to her and like told her how ugly she was. First he tried to assaulted her, and then when she tried to push back, he called her ugly and something, and like that image is something that like stayed with me, because she talks about then she goes on to talk about like how she started writing, or rather rewriting, different endings to all the fairy tales that she was reading as a child, which is when this happened. And that sort of has carried her to her adult life, and that is what she does. She sort of rewrites all the fairy tales, all the stories of women that we know. She's rewriting them, and that is something that like really inspired me. And I also in some way want to rewrite my own story, that like I don't want people to keep thinking about like me as a survivor of child sexual abuse, or like somebody who has depression, anxiety, and all of these things. I mean, which is why I think like I wrote my book the way I did. That like, yeah, these things are happening, but like there's also all these books I'm reading, all these people I dated, like all of this Bollywood influence that it has on me, and like I'm also like a difficult and sometimes cruel person. Like and a holistic individual is like what Helen Oyeyemi taught me to be. And so yeah, these two women.
That's actually a really important point. I think many of those are important points. Just with an eye on the time, though, if I were to ask you both, two-part question. Manjari, you first. Why do you think it's important for us to have these conversations in sort of more and more accessible ways, more and more languages right now in India? And coupled with that, is there one stereotype or myth that you'd like just to bust?
So we need to have these conversations constantly all the time in as many languages as we can, because I mean, like Urvashi said, that like she and I, we belong to like a particular socio-economic background. We have like certain privileges of therapy and you know, like friend circles who, where people understand what we are going through, or at least have the privilege to understand these things. But like most people do not. Like my mother has all her life struggled with anxiety and she still doesn't understand it. So like the language in which we're talking about these things is important. It needs to be non-academic, it needs to be non-specific, it needs to be language that is accessible to everybody, and it doesn't need to just be in English, because like we live in India, like there are too many languages and most people don't understand English. So like we need to like break out of these you know, very limited circles of our existence, and we need to like reach out. Like I think Urushi's book or my book need to be translated in as many Indian languages as possible, because like what she is saying is also extremely important, and the way she is explaining things is just so accessible. Like it's raw and accessible, and I think I'm also doing the same. So unless we reach out to people who are, you know, living in tier 2 cities or like even smaller places,
Yeah.
there is no point. Like just Delhi and Mumbai and Bangalore are not going to be enough, and we know that like things are not good in these places either. So yeah. Oh god, so many myths around people who are depressed, that like or like it's like, you know, you don't look depressed at all. Like where are your dark circles, and like what do you are like good at talking to people, and you seem happy. I was like, yeah, because I mean, depression is not like person sitting in their room staring at the wall with like dark circles and, you know, one spotlight on their head. It doesn't really function like that. We are people. I mean, some of us are high functioning individuals. I am one of them, and that does not really take away that the fact that like we are depressed at the same time, and you don't know what is going on in our head. Just because we can put up a good facade, or even like it's not even like we can't feel real joy in our lives. I mean, it's like an entire spectrum. You just can't look at people with mental illnesses in this one way that like cinema or I don't know who has taught you to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Urvashi?
So I want to start with the second question. I think for me, like I echo a lot of what Manjari is saying about this, about how what people think a depressed person looks like. And I think for me, something that I want is for people to start seeing illness differently, because we just imagine someone who is on a sick bed, who is like, you know, connected to tubes, or, you know, those are the sorts of images that like we really take away. Like, you know, we have to have a fever, we have to have like, you know, physical symptoms. And I really want invisible illness to become part of our vocabulary in whatever words, you know, people want to use around it. But there needs to be some acknowledgement of the fact that there are things going on like inside our body that are just that are not going to be visible to you, even if you are like particularly close to us. Like there are things going on every day, at least in my case, and you know, I'm assuming even in your case, Manjari, like there is like, but you will not know about it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean that, you know, that is not like the context that we are operating inside of, you know. So I really want to see like more understanding and empathy for that. And I know that is going to require like substantial acts of imagination on the parts of people, because they are so used to a specific idea of an ill person. So yeah, I really want to see that expand. I really want that like stereotype to be chipped away at, and to start to include people like us. In terms of reaching like a much wider audience, I agree that, like, you know, one of the ways to do that is to translate like existing works. Even say, you know, Skin Stories Archive can be translated, because you know it is like does have diverse stories to some extent. But I also think that publishers need to start doing the work of opening some doors. They need to start like commissioning more books like this, and they need to like make an effort to reach out to people that they know have, you know, for example, written an essay or two or talked about it on social media. And if they have the potential to be a good writer and their story is one that isn't out there, approach them, you know, explore those ideas, like look into publishing those memoirs, essays. Yeah, there is a lot of scope in India, and I think that like it's up to like, you know, good editors at publishing houses to tap into that.
That's
I think one of
actually a
the
really
things
great.
that, sorry, just wanted to add a little bit. That what Urvashi is saying is absolutely right, and I think that not just publishers. I think like places like literary magazines. Magazines are dying in India, and so more and more people like you and me included need to like maybe invest a little bit in that. Like literary magazines actually do tend to like find newer voices, people who don't have any amount of like culture capital, and I think that is like I was found by people because of the literary magazines that I was published in. Like I think that was like the place I began, and I feel like yeah, that's very important to publish more like in places that are not necessarily Penguin or Westland or HarperCollins. I mean, it needs to be more holistic that way.
Yeah, and
More
I just want to
platforms
add
for
one other. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go on.
Sorry, just one small point is that I also think that it needs to reach children's literature. I think that Pratham does an excellent job, like when it comes to other subjects, and I would love to see, publishing houses like that do stuff for children. Like I think that's so important, like to start young.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's an important point, and probably the note we'll have to leave for the moment. But here's to more storytelling, and really more power to the two of you. I know you'll be inspiring countless others as well. Thank you for taking the time, and thanks for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you for having us.